For those of you that know me, you know that I read a ton and we do a lot of book reports after our books. So after not reading for, I don't know, like 9 years after law school, I'm hopefully on pace to do 24 books this year. There's one book that I started that I cannot finish, Built to Last by Jim Collins. It is just way too dense for me to get through. Like, it is a scholarly, well-researched study over 200 something pages. I highly suggest, if you can get through it, awesome. If not, just take the 20-minute breakdown of it because it's super important. The biggest thing that he talks about in there, though, is these really successful businesses, the ones that are built to last, are run not by time tellers, but by clockmakers. And what he means by that is these companies that truly created a culture in which it teaches other people to be able to tell the time, to make the clock, how to do it, so that they have these leaders that will outlast the person who started the company or as they go through changes. That thing has sat with me so much as I think about my exit strategy in 20 years or so, but still. And that's why I'm super excited to talk to Amy Gardner today. So our topic today is Do As I Do, the secret to creating great leaders at your firm, especially you, but not just you. For those of you that don't know Amy, she's a certified career and career transitions coach and team development and leadership consultant with Apochromatik. She works with law firms and other employers to re-engage teams and help them, I cannot read from this distance, I'm sorry guys, help them thrive by improving relationships, strengthening emotional intelligence, building leadership skills, developing resilience, having difficult conversations, and more. She also worked with lawyers one-on-one and in small group focus in focus attorney masterminds to advance their roles or transition to a new one. She regularly delivers trainings on subjects including time and stress management, goal achievement, emotional intelligence, and career topics. She is a former Big Law associate, partner at a mid-sized Chicago firm, and dean of students at the University of Chicago Law School. She holds a master's degree from Northwestern University, JD from the University of Chicago, and BA from Luther College. She holds certifications in team and leadership coaching, one-on-one coaching, and assessment certifications, including the EQI 2.0. I don't know if I pronounced that correct, Amy. I'm sorry.
Yep.
All right, cool. Her career and goal achievement advice has been featured in media, including numerous podcasts, ABA publications, Bustle, Corporate, Glassdoor, Health, Monster, NBC, and Women's Running Magazine. Amy's service to the legal profession includes serving on the Illinois Committee on, I think, character and fitness. Charter and fitness is what it says, but I think character and fitness. Yes.
No, character and fitness.
All right. And iWill's governance committee. Amy, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk with you.
I'm excited to learn from you. And that's how I know it's the best episode. If I'm geared up to learn a ton from our guest speaker, I know it's going to be great. That being said, our last episode, another great example of that, Marco Brown. So for those that don't know, Marco runs a very large family law firm in Utah. He talked to us about how to stop being a lawyer and start being a leader. So Marco and I went really in depth in his story, some of the mistakes he made from growing, and really some helpful tips and tricks on how to make that transition from the lawyer of a firm to actually being the leader of a true business that doesn't need you. So great episode to listen to after we hear the wonderful insight from Amy. So that being said, Amy, awesome bio. Can you tell us a little bit? I want to hear a little bit of that story, though, like that transition from big law to what you're doing now. What caused that?
So I was at Skadden, Chicago as a litigator for a long time, 5.5 or 6, just short of 6 years, basically. And I actually genuinely enjoyed the work I was doing there. I was getting great opportunities. But looking down the road, I knew that I didn't really want to be a partner at Skadden. And I know that I'm not the kind of person who would be thrilled with not being a partner. And so I decided to transition to a mid-sized firm where I thought that I would be happier as a partner. And I got some great opportunities there. I went from preparing other people for DEPs to taking a ton of DEPs and second chairing a big jury trial and doing all those things. And then it's sort of one of those deals where you're grabbing the gold stars and then you're thinking, like, what am I supposed to do with these things? Like, now what? And at the same time, at that point, I got a fellowship with the German Marshall Fund where I went to Europe for 4 weeks. And that allowed me to get out of the everyday grind and think about what I really wanted. And coincidentally, my law school had a new dean. I came back from the fellowship, met him at an event a week later, and ended up leaving practicing to go back to my law school to be the dean of students.
And you know what's maybe funny is the wrong word. I will tell you, of all of my law school professors, the one who was the most, I want to say, impactful on me, like the one who really pushed me to be the best law student I could, was also a former Skadden Arms I don't know, associate or something like that. So I don't know, maybe there's something there about being at such a large prestigious firm that really burns into people that wanting to give back teaching mentality, because it's great.
That's interesting. Yeah, there's a big pro bono focus at Skadden too. And one of the partners in Skadden Chicago would always say that his job was to teach us how to walk through walls for our clients, but we had to come to wanting to walk through walls for our clients. And so I do think that Skadden is one of those firms that attracts people who really want to do big things.
That the way that you phrase that is, so he twisted it slightly differently. So I went to a terrible law school. Let me rephrase. I went to a low tiered law school, and he was.
It all worked out though.
Look, I'm gonna totally, absolutely, and literally, I've only had one client ever care, and it was because they also went to the same school that I went to, not for law school, and then we were talking about it. I've never had it negatively impact me in any way, shape, or form. Yada yada yada. But the professor like specifically said that to us, like not the you are at a low tier law school, but it's like, look, he went to Michigan. Shout out Mark Edelman. We'll tag him, whatever. And he was like, look, I'm going to treat you like you're at Michigan. You guys are capable of it. And that same mentality of like, you have to be ready to run through the walls. You have to be ready. You have to be treated the same way you would at whatever it was, like the fifth or sixth best law school in the country. When he was there, it like caused us to rise up to the expectations. So I love that. All right. Really that being said, we're talking about leadership here. And so I'm curious, like, where did the change become from being a lawyer to really focusing on building these leaders? Talk to me about that process.
So when I got back to the University of Chicago Law School, so I had graduated, 8 or 9 years earlier, and I get back and I discovered that, and I had really looked up to my dean of students. She has been a huge impact on me, wonderful person. But I was surprised to learn that there had not been changes in the way that students were being prepared to practice law. Remember, I graduated from law school, a few months after September 11th, and I was going back in 2010, right? If you think about 2002 to 2010, a lot had changed. Right.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Yet it didn't feel like
2008 to 2010 was a huge change, let alone September 11th to 2008.
Right. Right. And so it really felt as though there were lots of things that could be done to better prepare students to practice. I mean, when I did a jury trial when I was at Skadden, and I remember when I first started there, I didn't know where the Daly Center was in downtown Chicago. Like, a place that you need to go to court. I had no idea. And so it wasn't so much about, I knew that students were being, very well prepared in the classroom. It was much more about, how do you deal with the paralegal? How do you, figure out these things that I think a lot of times we're hiring law students or new lawyers to practice law, but they're not going to be successful unless they can, figure out where the Daly Center is, right? Unless they can figure out how to call up the client and ask for a document without letting the client sense the panic in their voice. They need to be able to communicate with people. And so when I was the dean of students, I started a number of leadership programs to really address what I saw as a gap between what the way students were being prepared and the way that I knew students needed to show up on their first day as a lawyer. And through that, I was working with law firms to pay for these things. And I kept hearing from law firms again and again, oh, I wish we had had that. Or, I call and say, hey, will you pay for a business etiquette class? And they'd say, oh, we should do that. And so I realized it wasn't so much that it wasn't just law schools that weren't preparing, some law schools that weren't preparing law students for these leadership things that they needed to know to do well. It's also some of the firms. There's a real opportunity there, I think, to enhance the way that we're teaching lawyers to show up and to lead. And so then that just sort of opened the door. And I decided to get my coaching certification and a number of other certifications to help me to do that. And I went into business actually with my husband, who has a management background, and which has been fantastic because he can help lawyers with some of the many, many, many management issues that come up too. So we work together with teams both in firms and outside.
That part's interesting too, because I know I give law school so much crap for like exactly the same thing that you were trying to bridge the gap for. It's interesting though, like, so from my perspective, I got the opportunity to do a lot of trial team at the law school that I went to, and so we'd have sitting judges and attorneys and alum come back and talk to us and train us, and we go to these tournaments, and we'd always get those judges that are like, "You all are better than real attorneys that I see every day," and I always thought like, "That's so sweet. I really appreciate it. Like, I'm honored that you would lie to us that way." And then I went out as a prosecutor, and I was like, "Oh yeah, there are a lot of attorneys we were better than." And to be fair, that was because we had a caseload of one over 4 to 6 weeks with feedback from 20 people on how to do it and whatever. But it was so interesting to see that thing and realize exactly what you're talking about. Like, there are so many attorneys that law school helps you think like a lawyer, and it gives you the right to practice, but not the tools to be successful with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, whenever students can be involved in things like legal clinics or moot court, things like that, it can be really helpful. But I think too, we need to provide a safe space to make those mistakes and with some supervision so that there's a backstop, right? And I think some law schools are better at it than others. And I think that there's some of the burden is on law students to learn these things and go out and learn them. But I also think that often law students don't know what they don't know. And so the more law schools can help them, and then the more employers can be prepared to fill in the gaps, the better off they'll be as lawyers.
It's interesting. So in law school, I got the opportunity to be a CLI at the state attorney's office, a certified legal intern, and then I ended up back as a prosecutor. And it's funny because the PD's office had the same thing, but our school was like, look, you don't necessarily want to do the PD program beforehand because you're actually representing a specific person. So there's a lot less freedom. From the state attorney side, they were like, look, there's an attorney sitting with you. You've got support, but like, if you make a mistake, so be it. Like, like you're only going to deal with misdemeanors, nothing terribly serious. If you let somebody off because you screw up, it's a lot better than getting somebody convicted because you screwed up. And I was like, I love that my prosecutor's office is being that open and honest with us. But at the same time, it gave me the opportunity to do, half a dozen trials as a law student and 20 something motions and lose a ton of them and learn so much from it.
Yeah, it's funny. I worked one day a week in the state's attorney's office in the city of Chicago for part of my third year in law school, and I had done the clinic, and I was an editor on Law Review. Like, I had done a number of these things you're supposed to do, and it was really helpful to go in there. And I was actually assigned to traffic court, so you could do a trial at 10 and then turn around and have another one at 2. And I would often get the trials that prosecutors would say, like, either this is super easy, she can't blow it, or we're not going to win this thing no matter what, so let her go. And it was great to have that hands-on experience. And I think more law students need it and more lawyers need it. Even if you don't expect to be doing trials, I think that the way that you handle litigation is completely different once you've actually had a trial. I mean, I had this trial that I did at my second firm. They read one of my deposition transcripts into the record. And you better believe that it changed the way I take depositions. When you actually see it happen in front of you and you realize, oh, I was starting every question with, okay, that's so helpful. It just makes you a better lawyer. And so I think anything law students can do and junior lawyers can do to get more hands-on experience is better.
Or Amy, you could do the way I did it. You just be really friendly to the court reporters and then they leave out all the filler words. Just kidding.
That must have been my mistake.
All right. So my question, because obviously you're working with firms of varying sizes or with lawyers one-on-one versus firms, is there like a difference in the leadership process on that smaller firm individual basis versus the larger firm more group basis, or is it basically the same tips and tricks?
I think that sometimes people in smaller firms come with a different skill set than people who are already in a bigger firm, just because of the things that have been emphasized. But I think either way, and many of the firms we work with are 6-lawyer firms, and then also we work with the big firms, and we work with teams of in-house lawyers, as well as working with teams that aren't lawyers. But one of the things that I notice is that at some firms we will do, say, a 12-month leadership development program focused on associates or partners at a certain level. At smaller firms, it tends to be more focused on the team, and frankly, I think leadership development is obviously really important for lawyers. That's why you've devoted multiple episodes to talking about it, right? But I think another piece of it that's really important is the team development. And by team, that might be that your firm is a team. If it's a small firm, it might be that you have a firm that everybody's a team, but maybe there's a trademark team within it and there's a patent team within it, right? And what we see is that with the small firms, often there's more of an openness to including everybody as part of the team, which I think gets you better results. So it's one thing for us to work with partners, say, on how to give work or give feedback. But if we can also work with the whole team on overall goals or building trust, working on communication skills, then obviously that's just going to amplify the results of working with people on individual leadership skills.
I love that. I love that truly getting the entire team, like the team wishing together, being more helpful. Gives me a lot of hope because that's how I do most of my stuff. I'm like, look, you all can have your own department meetings, but like there are certain things that we need to be working together to unsilo, I think is Greg's lingo on it. All right, so then here's I want to flip that a little bit. Look, there are going to be the law firm owners listening to this that immediately are like, I need Amy. There's no doubt about it. I'm listening to this. I know I need this, whatever. There are other law firm owners that are like, I really hate what's going on. I have this problem. I am stuck on blah, 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 but I don't know what the right solution is. So for that group of people, what are the common problems that you're seeing or hearing from your clients that lets them know like you're the right fit to help solve for them?
So one thing that often happens that leads to somebody reaching out to us is maybe they have something on the calendar. They promised their team they were going to do a retreat, or they promised they were going to start doing quarterly something or other. And so this is bearing down on them and they don't really know where to do and what to do, where to start. And they're thinking, why would I go to a ropes course, or why would we do another happy hour? That hasn't fixed whatever the thing is. And I think we could be better if we were more thoughtful about it. That's a good time to reach out.
Wait, Amy, you mean that 1 2 hour happy hour isn't going to solve 10 years of bad office culture?
Surprise! Yes, it actually is not. So that's one time that people reach out. Another time is when people are having issues with recruiting and realizing they're having a couple people leave and thinking, maybe we should be looking at this. So that's an important time. Also, when you have new leaders who are taking over and want a fresh start, or maybe you just want a fresh start, you're thinking, okay, I want 2022 has been fine, but I want 2023 to be better. And I realize that to get the results I want next year, I better get started now.
You just gave me a little bit of a heart palpitation. We are only 4 months away from 2023. This is, yeah, it's a coming. Interesting. All right, so. Okay. For that law firm owner who has not yet brought on a coach such as yourself to help through this, like what are some of the small things they can be doing now to help build a better rapport, to help be in a better position, to bring in professional help? Like what are some of the, low-hanging dumpster fires that they can put out themselves?
So one resource that we offer that can be really helpful is for law firm leaders to request an invitation to one of our executive forums. And what we do is we get together other executives. And so you might be attending alongside a law firm owner from Chicago and managing partner at a big firm in LA, as well as somebody who's the head of marketing at a Fortune 500 company, right? But all the issues are the same. And so you get that cross-pollination of ideas. And those are completely free. You come, you get ideas, you get commiseration, and that can be really helpful. So that's one tool. Another tool that I think is really important is to actually look at what's going on in your firm. I think what happens is, as a leader, it's so easy to just put blinders on and think, you know what, billables are fine, everything's fine, right? And to pull back and think, one, what is the situation actually? And the best way to do that is to talk to your people. We'll often start off with a pulse survey and some one-on-one conversations to see how things are going. And then once you've actually sort of assessed the situation, another thing that's really important is to sit and talk with your team about what could the firm look like? What should those goals look like? And one of the things we see all the time is, particularly with younger generations, whether they're support staff or lawyers, they need to feel connected to the mission, the values, and the goals. They just
say to. Younger generation. Are you talking about like the owner being a younger generation? You're talking about the employees being younger generation.
The employees, gotcha. And the lawyers, because it's so important. It can't be. Often we'll ask people, "What do you think the mission of the firm is?" And they'll say it's to make XYZ person rich. Like, not motivating. Right. And one of the things that we see is if people feel connected to the goals, mission, and values, then they're going to be less likely to bolt over a little bit more money coming from down the street. Now, if somebody's offering them a lot more money, But if you are just trying to keep people from looking and keep people engaged and keep people really feeling connected to the firm, that's a really important way to do it.
So it's so interesting. And here, I guess my question along those lines is: look, you've been doing this longer than I have, especially from the. I mean, I guess I don't do what you do, but like from the general attorney zeitgeist type situation. Is that something that you've seen be more popular recently, or like at what point did younger employees care about the mission vision of the company?
I think that younger employees have always cared, but I think that Generation Z and millennials are much more willing to say it out loud. I mean,
Gotcha. Okay.
the number of lawyers and support staff and people in other roles that we talk to who say, I'm leaving because they won't give me feedback. Well, I think people in my generation, we knew we needed feedback to improve, but gosh, it was kind of nice to be in the dark. And I think that millennials and Generation Z, I think they have a better understanding of what they need and they're more willing to say it out loud. And I think they've also seen that you can't just believe everything's fine because they've seen their parents get laid off, they've seen recessions,
Mm.
and they have a better understanding of all that. And I think it's important to realize that it makes it better for everybody, even if you don't have a bunch of 25-year-old employees who are saying, I want to know why I'm doing this. It makes everybody feel like there's something that they're doing something that matters, and who doesn't want to believe they're doing something that matters. And that's not to say that your firm can't be one of the goals be to hit a certain dollar amount. That's not it at all. But if people can really tie into, I'm filling out a form, but the reason I'm filling out a form is because somebody came up with an idea that's really important, and we're going to protect that idea, right? It's very different if you just think about it as filling out a form versus I'm protecting somebody's brilliant idea. Okay?
And look, I think we have like for so long, all of this business coaching was that 1980s boiler room, always be closing mentality. And like, I think we finally gotten back to teaching people to be human. But I will tell you, for those of you listening to this that are like, oh, forget the millennial snowflakes, I promise you, you will make so much more money if your employees understand the purpose. Like, if you really take the investment into this, you will see the financial benefit exponentially, despite the fact of thinking that they're, namby-pamby, whatever, the participation trophy earners, whatever. Like, I promise you, there is a great work ethic and a great connection to be had there when they feel that right connection to the purpose of the company.
Absolutely. And the reality is your firm cannot continue if you don't ever hire anybody who's below XYZ age, right? And one of the things that we have seen is if you can get everybody to feel really connected to what the firm is working on, people are much more willing to start using their connection to bring in business than if they just think that the job is to come in and just execute. It's really about the next best version of the team versus thinking about how are we going to address this crisis? How are we going to prevent that crisis? It's really all about how do we get this firm or this team to be the next best version of ourselves.
And so in terms of getting these, I want to say younger employees, but at this point, that's not even like millennials are 40.
Right.
So it's not even that situation, but like in terms of the next generation of mid-level leadership, higher level leadership, like, is that the first step? Like making sure they are truly invested in that underlying purpose of the business more than just to make money?
I think it's twofold. So one is definitely making sure that everyone feels really connected to the firm and what the point is and what you're all working toward. And then the second is making sure that everybody understands that you as a law firm owner are also invested in them. And we see this all the time where people say, well, I'm leaving because they won't give me any feedback, which they then interpret as they're not invested in me. Or I'm leaving because I asked for some money for coaching and they said you should pay for it out of pocket. And it's not about the XYZ thousands of dollars. It's really about the not being willing to entertain investing in them. Right. And so it has to be that you are helping everybody get invested in the firm, but you're also showing your investment and care for them.
And so in terms of, I guess, presenting that, like in terms of getting that vision ingrained in everybody, what are some of the best practices?
Well, what we like to do is rather than ever having it be top down or, somebody goes up on a mountaintop and comes back down with the mission, goals, and values, that sort of thing, is we like to work with teams off the bat to establish those. And then we work with them on the issues that are holding them back from the ideal firm that they've set out for themselves. So often it's things like trust, often it's things like communication. What happens is, I'm from Iowa, so we call it Minnesota nice, but this sense of, well, I'm going to be too nice to tell that person their fly is down. Well, the reality is if nobody tells them their fly is down, they can't zip it, right? You can't see the spinach in your own teeth. And so it ends up being that sort of communication issue, not so much the, throwing binders and yelling at people, but the lack of direct communication. We'll often work on things like emotional intelligence, all these issues that will often get called. Somebody will call us and say, people on my team don't talk to each other. We need a session on communication. Well, and we can come in and do that, right? But no transformation happens in a lunch and learn. You have to pull back and think about, that's how it's showing itself. What's the underlying issue? And then we help you work on those underlying issues.
It's interesting you talk about it that way, because obviously, like, from the legal perspective, right, like the malfeasance is obvious. Like, if you are coming in and screaming at everybody, if you're throwing stuff at people like that, I am glad that people are aware that that would not create the culture they necessarily want. Right. But then the flip side is that misfeasance type stuff, like that becomes like they think they're doing that person a favor, but ultimately they're doing a disservice to themselves, to that person, to the rest of the organization, to the other employees, and ultimately to the clients by not giving the Gary Vee calls it kind candor, by not giving the right feedback along those lines.
Absolutely. And I think this is something that happens in a lot of environments, but I think it's particularly common among law firms because nobody that I can think of, at least, went into law school thinking, I am a great manager and therefore I should go to law school, right? It tends to be people realize, oh, I could have my own firm, or I'm doing well in the firm, I could become the managing partner. And it's not as though anybody sets off to be a bad manager or sets off to not have a great team. It just sort of happens while you're busy running to court.
Right. All right. So, yeah, I mean, it is liberating that it's a problem of lack of knowledge, lack of time, as opposed to a problem of lack of care about, being a good leader, running a good team, whatever you want to call it. All right. So they've come together to come up with the core values, the tenets of that vision, whatever. They've started implementing some ideas to put those in place. Is there a next step, or the other option is, what does it start looking like when these things are being ingrained? I don't know which makes the most sense, and the next thing for us to chat about.
I think the next step is then to look at what's holding you back from that and to identify those issues so you can begin to pick them off. We often do with teams what we call skunk on the table sessions, where we get people talking about the things that no one will talk about. Because what we find is you can say, the law firm leader can say, all right, what's holding us back from this? And people will say, oh, we need more staff, or, oh, we need more money. We should fire bad clients, like the low hanging fruit. Great. And that's not untrue, but right. You also have to be willing to look at the, the underlying issue, which is sometimes things like you favor this person, or, you won't respect boundaries, those sorts of things that people don't want to say out loud.
I can imagine, in talking with a bunch of lawyers, one of the other common ones is, we need more trust, but we don't want to share our revenue numbers with the staff. Like, that's got to be a common one, right?
Yes.
All right, you're laughing.
It's so common. Yeah.
All right. What's how do you work with somebody to overcome that? And to be fair, I know that there are certain people that we will never convince to be more two-way honest with their employees, but for the ones that are truly struggling with it, but we can convince them to make the right change, how do you help them through that process?
I think it's about meeting people where they are and understanding what the concerns are. I mean, the reality is that if you trust your staff to see, XYZ's divorce papers, and you expect your clients to trust your staff to see their divorce papers, then I think you have to be thinking about why you don't trust your staff with your most personal information.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, look, at the end of the day, I'm gonna give the opportunity for there to be a third reason, but ultimately, like, one thing is you don't want them to see how much money you're making at their expense. The other one is you don't want them to see how little money the firm's making, and then have them be worried about leaving. I'm sure there's other reasons, but like ultimately, it's a fear-based analysis somewhere.
Well, and I think too, if you haven't done any of the other work with the team, if you just walk in one day and say, "Oh, here are our numbers," that's great and all, but you can end up with one of those situations. I think you have to have that foundation of trust. You have to have that foundation of common goals. You have to have that foundation of being candid with each other before you do that. And I do think that, often I feel like a part of our job as lawyers is always to help the client reach the goal that they want to reach, even if the method they had in mind is not possible. And so sometimes it is a matter of thinking through, okay, well, this law firm leader is where they are right now. How can we still build the trust? How can we still help people feel invested? And I think especially for leaders who might be more resistant to the idea of bringing in somebody to work with the whole team, then once they start to see the other benefits, then they might feel more comfortable doing it. So I don't think I understand the concern, but I do think that a lot of good can come from being candid. And the reality is that the people on your team are really your number one client. Right? If you don't take care of your team, they're not going to take care of your clients. And part of how you take care of your team is allowing them to know what's really going on.
So, like, in terms of employees wanting that feedback or wanting that coaching or training or whatever it is, like, is this as simple as just asking them, or is there best practice, or is there something more to it?
You mean in terms of asking them if they want more feedback or asking them what
Right.
they want,
So
or?
you were talking about some of the issues being they're not getting feedback, or the office isn't covering training for them to grow and develop. Like, it does that all that boil down to just having the conversation about asking your employees what they want or what they're stuck on or what the issues are?
I think it's a good first step. Another thing that I think works well is to do an anonymous survey.
Okay.
I think another thing is to have somebody who's impartial come in and ask the question. I mean, it is incredible the differing, and this happens all the time, where we will go in and have a stakeholder interview and we will ask questions that have been asked on a survey, and we will get more honesty and more depth in the answers because
Gotcha.
there's a sense that, oh, they're taking this seriously. They brought in a consultant. Or there's a sense that, oh, well, she's not going to tell my secret. We actually did some stakeholder interviews at a company with a team where they had done a survey, and the survey results were not great. But through the stakeholder interviews, we found out that two people on the team hadn't spoken in 10 years, actually over 10 years. And
Whoa.
the new leader who had brought us in was aware that there was some prickliness, but didn't know, like, they didn't speak. And so that's one of those things where you find it out just because you have somebody who's a stranger essentially, and they're willing to open up in a way that they wouldn't to their boss.
Do you find, and I don't know, maybe this isn't statistically significant or whatever, but do you find that smaller firms, it's harder to get that honesty because it's easier to tie it back to who said it versus at larger firms, it's easier to remain anonymous with some of the feedback, or is that not the case?
I think actually with smaller firms, people tend to and can feel more invested. I think in bigger
Oh,
firms, there
okay.
can be an attitude of like, this kind of sucks, but realistically, I can go down the street anyway. So why bother? Right. And I think some of it is if people don't care, they're not going to give you that honest feedback. And I think that sometimes at a smaller firm, it can actually be easier to foster that environment where people give that feedback. But I do think there can be a sense of, and we see this all the time, where people won't put stuff down in the survey, but they'll tell you in the conversation.
Gotcha. All right. So then I want to change gears a little bit. Like, in terms of getting employees to become more leaders, in terms of building that next generation of leader, where does that come in, or where does that start?
So I think that one of the places to start is really as soon as somebody joins the firm, you should start viewing them as a leader. A lot of times we see as, they'll have like a 5th-year associate leadership academy. And well, that's great. But in the meantime, they've ticked off their coworkers and clients for the last 4 years. right? Or they've just felt like nobody cared about them, like a fish out of water, and they've been sitting on Indeed all day, not getting their billables done, right? And so I think it really starts when people join the firm. And I think one of the best places to start is with an assessment about the things that you want to focus on, and understanding where they want to come from. So that might be, we use an emotional intelligence assessment a lot, because those are the skills that aren't going to show up in other ways until it's real damage has been done. Once you have a sense, though, of what they want to work on, because if you just tell somebody you need to work on your communication skills and they actually really feel like they're insecure about this other thing, they're not going to get as far. Then really creating a professional and personal development plan can be really helpful. And none of this has to be some extravagant thing. I mean, this can be one piece of paper that says, over the next year, you're going to attend a bar association workshop on this, or you're going to go to the NITA training on that. Or you're going to have 4 1-hour sessions, one a quarter, with a coach to check in and make sure you're being accountable, so that the managing partner isn't the one having to deal with this, right? So making people feel like their individual needs are being met, and that they're a participant rather than being told from on high what they need to work on, makes a huge difference.
From the standpoint of the emotional intelligence evaluation, are there like hard and fast results that make the best leaders, or does that just give you a tool to look at what the company needs in their leadership?
It's really about the tool to help people see where they are and what they want to focus on. For example, we worked with a team where one of the issues was really these, whenever there was a filing due or a big issue, it was just chaos, right? And what we discovered was that some people were really high in stress tolerance and others were really low in stress tolerance. And that gap was causing the problems. And so just understanding, oh, okay. So to some of these folks, the fact there's a deadline on the calendar and nothing's done 2 days ahead is going to be much more stressful than it is for other folks. And just recognizing that. And it's also a matter of helping people see objectively. It's very different when someone says to you, you seem to not have much self-awareness, versus, a computer comes back and says, it looks like your answers indicate you could improve on self-awareness. It's a very different message and sets a very different tone.
I can imagine the first one being like, I don't have self-awareness. Have you seen yourself? As opposed to obviously the computer being, well, I guess,
right.
Other than watching Terminator, you don't want the computer to be self-aware, right?
Right.
So, all right, we're getting towards the end here. I want to make sure, is there anything else that we need to cover? Are there any other best takeaways for some of our firm owners on how to get this process going or how to make it better?
I think the key thing to think about is individual leadership development is important. And hopefully we all recognize that. But individual leadership development will be much more successful if you also work on team development, because the firm is really made up of individual teams and is a team itself. You can't ignore the team for the sake of leadership.
Is that a balancing act, or are those those things that go hand in hand?
I think they really go hand in hand. If you're asking someone to lead a team and the team has already built trust, is already open to being led and ready to be led and excited about what the point is of the team, it's going to be a much easier experience for the leader than if they are inheriting people who, they're just ticked off about everything, don't feel heard, don't feel like there's any candor or that they can raise the issues that they're concerned about. You're giving the leader a much harder job.
Gotcha. Okay, so that I misunderstood. That makes a lot more sense. So then my question really was, is there a situation where firms get to the case where there's like too many cooks in the kitchen? Like you can build up too much leadership among people to hurt the team, or is that not something you see as much?
Well, I think if the focus is on, if everybody feels like the team has a clear mission and is committed to moving the team forward, I don't think that's much of an issue. I think the problem just becomes if you have people who aren't willing to do the grunt work. But realistically, if everybody believes that what they're doing is worth doing, I think that you have a lot fewer problems with that.
So in theory, you could have a team where everybody leads on something as long as everybody's committed to that larger goal, vision, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, realistically, one way to be a good leader is, have you seen that video on YouTube? It's about how the first follower is more important than the actual leader, and it's the dancing guy video, and he's dancing in a field. And so he starts off dancing by himself, but it's only when somebody follows him that it becomes a movement, right? Otherwise, before that, it's just one weirdo.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so part of leadership and part of the way we approach leadership is that because you have improved your communication skills, say, or you're better able to run a meeting or to address concerns, that doesn't mean you're going to run every meeting. Right? It means that you are willing to pitch in when called on. And there's lots of different ways to be a leader. And some of them, include being at the front of the pack, and other times it means making sure that the things are done and being really that first follower. And when you work with the team, I think people are more willing to do that. There's less competition about who's going to get their name on this and who's going to be, recognized as the leader if everybody feels comfortable in their place.
I love that. All right, so I want to talk about our next episode, and then everybody will come back to Amy for the biggest nugget of wisdom, the final takeaway. So don't bail on us yet. That being said, next week, so 8/8 at 2:15 Eastern Time, we're going to have fellow Red Sox tortured fan as me, Bill Farias, with us. Bill's going to talk about where's the beef, setting client expectations. So if you recall the old Wendy's commercial, which is probably before most of our times, the old lady looking at it, where's the beef, opening up the hamburger, there's very little meat in there. And so Bill did this really great presentation on Max Law and touched on setting good client expectations starting at the consultation. So I wanted to go a little bit deeper with Bill on some of the things he talked about. So for any of you struggling with the maintaining those client expectations, setting the right expectations, under promising the right way to over deliver, this is going to be the chat for you next week, 8/8, 2:15 Eastern Time with Bill Farias. But that being said, Amy, you have shared so much with us already, but I want more. And so do our listeners and watchers of this. So for anybody who's been with us for the last, 50 something minutes or so, if they remember nothing that you said, what would be your most important takeaway, your biggest nugget of wisdom on how more lawyers can be the exhibit A of a successful attorney?
Leadership development is really important, but leadership development efforts will be more successful and your firm will be more successful if you also develop your team.
I love it. And again, this isn't that one happy hour every 5 years. Like this is really, it's making it a core kind of that passion, right? Like it's making it part of that internal brand, that business culture, that office culture type fit.
Absolutely. And we see again and again that it's not just the money you save not having to replace people. We see again and again that the KPIs end up better, right? But if you are only focused on the numbers and not paying attention to the people, you're not going to get the numbers you want. And I should just say, if anybody who's watching this or listening to this wants to talk to somebody, we talk to law firm owners all the time just to get a download from them. What's happening in your firm? Here are some resources you might consider. We're always happy to do that. And if people have a burning need where they want to talk through it right away, they can send me an email or reach out. And if they're interested in just the bigger picture culture issues, but not really ready to do anything about it now, they should sign up for one of our executive forums where they can talk with other leaders from various industries and hear best practices and ideas. And the way to do that is you just go to aposignup.com/forum to request an invitation to one of those forums. And they're totally complimentary and can be a good way to do some networking as well as get some ideas for things that you can do within your firm.
Perfect. That was going to be my next question, was because obviously for everybody who's watching this, we drop the links in the comments, but for everybody who's listening to this as a podcast or catches a clip later, we want to make sure we have that. All right. So that being said, Amy, thank you so much for being with us. To everybody who has listened to this and watched it, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And we hope to see you back next week, 8/8 at 2:15 with Bill Farias, where we talk about where's the beef, how to set the right client expectations. Until then, have a great week, everybody.